The
No
noted,
way.
the noted flautist and musicologist, Simon Dratfield. Simon, it is all you. Go ahead.
Okay, so today we're going to be listening to the Miserere of Gregorio Allegri. This is composed about 1638, and it's one of the most, if not the most, fabled choral work of the Renaissance. Now, this has been a huge favorite of mine. Sometimes I think it's the most beautiful piece of music I've ever heard. And only last week did I realize or find out that the lyrics of it are Psalm 51. Huh? So I immediately said, oh, the class has to hear this. Now, it's Psalm 51. It has two choirs and each in 5-part harmony. This is going to be important later. The original ornamentations that make the work famous were Renaissance techniques that preceded the composition. And these techniques were closely guarded by the Vatican. I think Allegri worked for the Vatican. In fact, now this is a fun story. The piece was classified as a state secret by the Vatican. It was forbidden to transcribe the music, and it was only performed at the Sistine Chapel and only on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday services. So there was a whole mystery around this piece. According to a popular story, and this is backed by actual family letters, the 14-year-old Mozart was visiting Rome with his father when he first heard this piece during the Ash Wednesday service. Upon returning to his rooms, he wrote it down entirely from memory, and then he returned to the chapel on Good Friday to check his work. Less than 3 months after hearing the song and transcribing it, Mozart had gained a lot of fame for the work and was summoned back to Rome by Pope Clement the 14th, who showered him with praise for his feat of musical genius and awarded him the chivalric Order of the Golden Spur on July 4th, 1770. So this is the story, that many musicians are familiar with. It's an amazing piece. It's somewhat long, so we're only going to listen to a couple of minutes of it now, and maybe at the end we'll listen to some more of it. I've put the Latin and English together on the screen, which Harold will put there, so you can follow along, though I'll tell you that this particular recording skips some of the verses. Since lifting the band has been lifted now, the Miserere has become one of the most popular a cappella choral works performed. So it's an amazing piece. I've loved it, since I've heard it, and I hope you enjoy it too. So Harold,
I sent out the text yesterday and suggested that people look at it next to Psalm 51 because it is the text of Psalm 51 in Latin. So I'm going to first share the video, and then I'm going to take that down and share the text while we're playing the video, if I can do this correctly. Okay.
Great.
Share. Okay. All right, we are going to stop there. And for our play out, for those who wish to stay, we will have the entire thing.
Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous.
And if I could just note, Simon, that when we do our music, we go back and forth with something like the Arvo Pärt, where one verse or one word is repeated over and over and over again, and it's not sung all the way through. And this is the other approach, the more Anglican approach, where it's sung from the very beginning to the very end, and you can clearly understand every word. But that is one gorgeous piece of music.
So to follow up, Harold, do you have the Yehuda Halevi poem? Should we?
Well, Rabbi, I actually do.
Wow. So yesterday I was very, very, very busy, but I wrote to our resident Hebrew poet specialist at CBST, Rabbi Reuven Greenwald, to see if he could find the poem that Alter mentions that uses the last verse of Psalm 17 as part of a gay, homoerotic, medieval Hebrew love poem. And of course, he came through. So here's the poem by Yehuda Halevi. So you see his years. And there were about 5 or 6 very, very famous medieval Hebrew poets who all wrote homoerotic poetry. And as Reuven did the translation here, and as he wanted us to point out, when it's normally translated to English, it's not clear that the lover is masculine, because in English we don't indicate that. So he puts into the translation, so it's really clear to the English reader what the Hebrew is actually saying. So, Ura, wake my male lover from your slumber, which is clearly masculine. And here is the verse. If you open up, if you have in front of you a Psalm 17, you see the final verse of Psalm 17 is this, Esba'a b'hakit tumunatecha. So he's quoting Psalm 17, not, he adds a little the things here, but how beautiful to see a use of Psalm 17. This is something I would never have known had it not been for Robert Alter. So awake my male lover, making it very clear from your slumber, astir. This second line is the one that is quoting Psalm 17. I will be satisfied by your image. If you see a man kissing your lips in a dream, it is I who will be the interpreter of your dream. So thank you to Rabbi Greenwald. And this is a fantastic exploration of the impact of Psalms in ways that most people don't know. And if this is your first time hearing that there is an entire body of Hebrew poetry that's homoerotic, that could be an entire course. Google it, look it up, Yehuda Halevi. Shlomo Ibn Gabriel was another one. There are about 5 poets from this period that are, if you study Hebrew poetry ever, they're absolutely included all the time. Now they're acknowledged that it's homoerotic. But as I said yesterday, the rabbis, these are very famous Jewish thinkers. They were like the Arabic world, poetry was not a side esoteric place in literature that, alas, I think it might be in America today. It was considered, if you were an intellectual, part of what you did is to write poetry. It wasn't so separated. So Yehuda Halevi also wrote a very, 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 very important book of Jewish philosophy that anybody studying medieval Jewish philosophy will read. And the other writers as well they all wrote philosophy, halakha, and poetry. It was just considered what a educated man the expectations of the time. And this really reflected Arabic culture of the same time. And we see the same thing happening in Arabic culture, which of course was a huge influence on the Jewish intellectuals who lived in Muslim dominant Arab cultures like Spain and Alexandria in Egypt as well produced a lot of this. Anyway, so it's a wonderful whole field. So how fabulous that from Psalms we dip a little bit into all of that. So let me stop for any questions or comments about that before we go back to 17.
Linda Watskin has had her hand up.
Hi, Linda. Can't hear you.
Linda, you're still muted. We still can't hear you for some reason, Linda.
We can't hear you, Linda.
Can't hear you. Maybe you're not plugged in or something. We just can't hear you when you're not. Okay.
You can
Lisa,
write it in the chat.
put it in
Maybe
chat,
in the
Linda, and
chat.
I'll ask. Lisa Brown.
So it resonated especially in the context, in the musical context, it's very Christian. And one of the things that resonated with me was this concept of grace. And I'm just wondering, and Rabbi, Cantor Naomi has pointed out chen, grace, but I think that it's different, or, chesed, but it's different in Christianity, right? It's something that's given that you don't have to really work towards. So I was just interested in that difference in concept.
Uh-huh. Well, grace does function very differently in Christianity, but there is certainly a concept of generous love, of chesed and of chen, which is not exactly, but it's not the same as Christian grace.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess the rabbi already answered. I was just wondering, over all these centuries, how did rabbis interpret all these homoerotic poems? What was their answer at the time?
Well, the famous answer that I mentioned, I think I might have mentioned yesterday, is a very famous commentary where they say the poet was actually in love with a married woman. So he was trying to hide the fact that it was a married woman, and somehow writing in male masculine language would be less. Yeah, it's a stretch. And honestly, I studied this stuff also in high school, in the yeshiva high school, and they just kind of pass over it. They just say this is a very important body of poetry, and they don't really focus on it. It's really only been in the last 30 years that it gets the visible attention. And Israel, actually, the LGBT community in Israel, some years ago published a wonderful collection of LGBT poetry in Hebrew. And they include a bunch of these, or some of these, as well as, because basically from the time of this Hebrew poetry to the 1930s and 40s and 50s, there's nothing. So it's kind of a big jump from the medieval period where Hebrew poetry had this had a major homoerotic theme to really what's the contemporary or modern time. There's not a lot in between, but it's a wonderful volume. I have forgotten the name of it, so we'd have to Google it, but it's a wonderful, wonderful volume, and it includes that. So now it's kind of accepted and assumed, and if you study medieval Jewish history, a professor would mention this now. Like, this is pretty standard. And some of them will say it was the negative parts of Arabic culture influencing Jewish culture. And another example of the decadence of Arabic culture, in which homoerotic poetry in that period was likewise very, very visible. But you'll see it everywhere now. So you could Google it. I'm sure there are even articles now. I haven't looked it up lately, but I'm sure you'll see. So it's a wonderful, Peter Klein?
Yes. In context, yes, when we talk about the writing coming out of the Iberian Peninsula and North Africa, this is identiform with Arabic poetry of the moment, and also of Persian poetry. It's really part of a sweeping culture. There was nothing unusual about it, and it was exquisite in every form. And if you look at Rumi at the other end of the empire, you'll find that it's profoundly homoerotic, and no one raised an eyebrow on this. It's exquisite stuff.
Yeah, kind of Christian Europe shut it down.
Right.
Yes.
And, that's why we see a gap from this period of time to the late 1800s. We might see some in the 1930s in Germany. That's when we start, so there's, in the 20th century, we start to obviously see things evolving out.
And the Jews don't have the same visual culture, but in Islam, there is a visual culture, and there is homoerotic, beautiful homoerotic art from this period, particularly Persian, Peter was saying. And then someone else pointed out that our Cooperberg Rittmaster rabbinic intern's last name is Yedid. So.
Indeed, that's correct.
Yedid, the same word here.
And somebody just asked me, so Yehuda Halevi, the famous philosophical work that he wrote is called Hakuzari, for those who are aware of but so again, all of these writers were writing philosophy and Jewish texts as well as poetry. It wasn't considered an esoteric field. Okay, so that was a lovely little digression, but also shows the power of the Psalms. And by the way, Yehuda Halevi would have known that his readers would have understood that reference. So as somebody said the other day, these Psalms were very much quoting from a Psalm. And it would be true today. If I quoted in something I wrote, "The Lord is my shepherd," probably most people will hear Psalm 23, right? You know, it would have been that kind of a evoking of classic text in this homoerotic setting that would have been understood by the audience. Okay, thank you again, Reuven Greenwald. Did anybody here take his class on Hebrew poetry?
It was great. Contemporary.
Yeah, he's a really fantastic. He is going to be our guest speaker for Yom HaAtzmaut this year, and he's going to be talking about poetry and to honor him right before he moves to Israel, where he becomes part of our CBST in Israel chapter. But he'll be in Jerusalem, and Shari and Deb are in Tel Aviv.
So is that a reverse diaspora? The people from CBST who go to Israel are part of the CBST diaspora in Eretz Israel?
Well, that's an interesting, I don't know, but Shari and Debbie are going home there. And we also have Andrea Wine, CBST member she lives, I think, in north of Tel Aviv somewhere. And Mikey Goldstein is in Rehovot, which is, I guess, part of Tel Aviv, right? Would you say that, Shari and Debbie? But it's in that Tel Aviv massive bubble. Habua. Okay, anyway, here we are.
Where do you want
Let's
to go
back to Psalm 17.
Which version? What do you want to look
Which version? Let's look at Levi.
Okay. You got it. Hold on. Happen to have it right here, Rabbi.
Thank you so much, Harold.
You're very welcome. Here we are.
All right, I'm going to just read through this a little bit to point out, I've tried to show you in looking at the original Sefaria, some of the problematics, and let's see how Levi responds to them and resolves them. So first of all, a prayer of David, Tfilah LeDavid. Again, it's unusual. There are only a few versions where a psalm begins Tfilah LeDavid, but it's not sui generis. Sui generis means the only example. So I'd say, I should probably look it up. I think there are 3 or 4 that actually say Tfilah LeDavid. But again, the first thing we notice in looking at a translation or an interpretation of a psalm, Levi keeps the structure of the psalm. He keeps the superscription. He keeps the numbers of the verses, and he's going verse by verse. But he indicates there's a gap format-wise. He indicates between Tfilah LeDavid in the English, because in the Hebrew, he knows a Hebrew speaker would understand there's a gap. In the English, he's using the format to show to an English reader there's a break between a prayer of David, period. Some kind of superscription. Hear out justice, Adonai. Shema, Yud He Vav He. Again, he in the Hebrew will do Yud Yud instead of Yud He Vav He. Tzedek. Pay attention to my ringing cry. This is how so remember if you now look at the way he's done the Hebrew for a moment, for those who can read the Hebrew, he's looking at 4 parallelisms or 4 sections of the psalm. And by putting them this way, you see Shim'ah, Hakshiva, Ha'azina. Remember, I talked about those 3 words for some level, maybe of an escalating or some different ways of saying, listen. By the way that Levi puts the Hebrew itself, he's emphasizing each beginning of the phrase is listen, pay attention, give ear. It's like there's a rhythm to it that I like the way Levi sets up the page. So he is with format emphasizing that. And then the final part of so it's 2 verses that are split up into these 4 sections. The final below, so hear, Pay attention, give ear. And then below sifatai, my lips will not be speaking guile or evil or deceit. So listen to me, listen to me, listen to me. I'm not exaggerating. This is not hyperbole. This is serious. Pay attention. This is a cry out saying, pay attention. I am speaking the truth. I am not trying to be full of deceit, and it's bad, but we don't get up to how bad it is, right? So that's a first verse. But you see, by Levi setting it up this way, it's almost as if those words are bolded with neon, right? Shim'ah, hakshiva, ha'zina. What should you listen to? Now, what's the difference between tzedek, rinati, tfilati? You can see immediately that the second two are very personal. And that's what a lot of scholars wonder about this. Why is tzedek without the pronominal suffix? In other words, it says my cry or my call, my prayer, but tzedek, it just says justice. So you can see what Levi does with, so it's a problematic, so to speak. It's a question. Why does it do that? You might expect tzedek to also say it with the pronominal suffix for me. So the way that Levi solves this problem, and every translator struggles with this, is to say, hear out justice, Adonai. So the first is not listen to me. The first is listen to justice. It's not just about me, so to speak. There's something about justice that if you follow justice, you will be able to hear my call, because my call is within justice. And the emphasis in that last part of the pasuk of the verse is, I'm not lying, I'm not full of deceit. So it's kind of a parallel to tzedek there. Okay, next verse 2, and I'll go through a couple and then we'll take some questions or responses to this. I really want to get through this if I can. Okay, verse 2. From your face, remember, I said for a Hebrew reader and for the Hebrew rhythm of a psalm or a poem for that matter, or even biblical prose, the repetition is always the way that a leitmotif or some kind of underlying message is being delivered. And it's considered, as I keep saying, in English, we emphasize using new words, different words, not repeating ourselves. In Hebrew, using some of the same words and the same shorashim is the height of great literature. So we have over and over again some form of milifanecha, from in front of you. But again, Levi wants to emphasize this, the face part, not just the idiomatic translation of milifanecha, which would be from in front of you. That would be kind of what it means, so to speak. But Levi understands throughout this psalm, we see some reference to God's face. So by putting it in the English and make sure that the English reader sees that, from your face itself, mishpati, again, the pronominal suffix for mine, from your face itself, let my judgment come. May your eyes behold my uprightness, Mesharim. You have probed my heart, libi, again, the pronominal suffix. You have paid me visits in the night, again, the pronominal suffix. You have tested me in the furnace, finding nothing. Again, so you see Levi is really emphasizing, and that's why I like Levi. He's really trying to stay with the Hebrew, but put it into English that pulls out from the Hebrew what he believes the meaning is. 4, as for human actions, lefu'ulot adam, as for human actions, now this is again, he's making decisions about translations. This is where the Hebrew is not so clear, but notice how he likes, and I think this goes back to what Yael said, there's a lot of body parts here. And one could translate a lot of these body parts with the idioms that the body parts are trying to say, but Levi likes to emphasize them, I think for good reason. As for human actions that are contrary to your lips, to what comes out from your lips. I have guarded myself, shamarti, myself, against violent ways. Tamoch ashurai, hold my steps fast to your pathways, magalotecha. Again, that ma'agal is also a circle. Interesting. My feet have not namotu, my feet have not faltered. I have called to you, for you respond. Again, not every psalm, as you remember, has so much back and forth between the speaker and God. Very much I, you, very much talking directly. I have called out to you because I know you to be a kind of God that's going to respond. And here we have the oznayim again, the ears. Now incline your ear, listen to me. We had up above, incline your ear to me. Hear, again, the repetition of the word to hear what I am saying. Let your covenantal love, and that's how Levi is dealing with this chesed, the loving kindness word, the word of again, remember I said that chesed also has a meaning like the word chasid of loyalty or of relationship, like a chassid has to their Rabbi. So Levi is doing something very interesting by translating chasdecha as covenantal love. And what is covenantal love? Meaning love that comes from an agreement, from a loyalty. You do something, I do something. A covenant is the usual English word for the Hebrew word a brit, meaning the covenant or agreement. So let your covenantal love. So that's how he's dealing with this word chesed, by using both love, but also covenant, saying it's not just an empty love. There's a love with obligation. So kind of reminding there's an obligation. Let your covenantal love do wondrous things with your right hand. And here we go to that right hand thing, delivering us. With your who have taken refuge against those who rise up against us. And here we come to the famous verse. Protect us, protect me, as though I were a pupil of your eye, going to what Yael was saying, that this is a meaning of, you'll see some people do the daughter thing, some do the pupil, but the Ishon Bat Ayin, as I were the pupil of your eye, which then becomes the apple of your eye in the King James and many English translations. Find me a secret place in the shadow of your wings. Very interesting translation there. A secret place. Where does he get secret? Tasti Renu, where it could also be translated as hide me. So he's using the Tasti Renu to say a secret place. I don't, did folks get the Purim email that we sent out last night announcing Purim? And I hope you noticed that Dave Yadid, we asked, who wrote a piece about Purim, talked exactly about Purim being the holiday of Hester Panim, of the hiding of the face of God. That even in fact, the Megillah is one of the few books we have in the Bible that does not mention God's name. It's only one of two that doesn't even mention God's name. And Hester Panim, this is the word. And Esther herself, the name is from this root, to be hidden or to hide. If you haven't read that email, I urge you to read it to see, now that you have seen this biblical root in this psalm, if it helps make Purim a little bit more interesting. But read Dave, he wrote a beautiful, beautiful piece about Purim. Mipnei Rishaim, now we move. Nine, as I said, 1 through 8 is this plea for help. 9 becomes, what do we need protection from? And as always, the question is, are we talking internal or external enemies? Mipnei Rishaim, from the face, again using the word face, not just from in front of, but from the face of wicked folks who want to ruin me. Oivai, my mortal enemies who are closing in on me. Their fatty parts. I kind of went over this kind of quickly yesterday. Chelev, which is this word chelev, chel bamo, which has lev inside. So there you see a heart, but chelev is the fatty parts of an animal. But what that means exactly. A lot of questions. Let's keep looking at that. Their fatty parts have shut them in. Their mouth is swollen with arrogant speech. More body parts. And now starting with speech as the evil. They have swarmed around our steps. They have fixed their eyes on us to cast us into the earth. Now, again, another reference to eyes. We go from the pupil of the eye, which is asking for God to fix their eyes on us. And then this 12, this verse, which is so powerful. They are like, or they look like, Domino Ka'arie, like lions, panting after prey. This fear of about doom is about to pounce, like cubs poised to pounce from their lairs. Going back, 13, going back to speak. So this 9 through 12 are just so far description. We have 13. Please arise, get up, help, help, help. This set your face, again, the word for face, against them. Cast them down. Let your sword, cherev shelcha, your sword save my life. 14, set your hand, another body part, against this gang of brutish men whose portion is only in this life. Meaning, and this description of what makes them so brutish, first of all, they're violent. Secondly, they speak evil. And then thirdly, they're only interested in the material gathering of things. They only care about this world and gathering wealth, whose bellies you stuff with your treasure, whose houses are stuffed with their children, who leave to their babies what's left. As for me, 15, this great ending of the psalm, as for me, but Tzedek, the word Tzedek is repeated, and your face is repeated. I want to see your face in justice, or I would look upon your face through justice. And here is that verse that Yehuda Halevi used in his poem. Would that I might be stuffed, not stuffed the way they are in that above paragraph with material things, but with images of you as I wake. Okay, I want to now look at Fisher. I'm going to try and, before we talk, just compare these two. Can we have somebody read Fisher out loud? Because I want to hear a little bit of the contrast, compare and contrast.
Okay, hold on a second.
Do we have a reader? Somebody who has not read. Let's have somebody who has not read yet. Let's hear a voice that we haven't heard.
I'm waiting for Rabbi. Who would you like to hear?
Who have we
I
not
think
heard
that
from?
anyone can do this.
Who's the newest member of our class?
Alicia?
Would you read the poem, the psalm?
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Hear the justice of my case, heed my plea. Give ear to my prayer, uttered with lips that do not pronounce deceit. Let my sentence come forth from your presence, for yours are truth-seeing eyes. You have proven my heart, thought of me in the long night, refined and tempered me till nothing impure remained, and my words and intentions were straight and altogether true. Guided by your words, I saw in the world all the dissolute paths. My steps trod only your byways, and my foot did not slip. So I call on you now, knowing you will answer. Incline your ear to me, hear my words, show the wonder of your kindness. You who save those who trust you from those who rise up against them with your right hand. Guard me like the apple of your eye. Hide me in the shadow of your wings. From my assailants who want to sap my strength and are everywhere about me. They are muffled by their successes. They mouth arrogance and self-pride. Harold, can you scroll up? Thank you. Now they are standing in my footsteps. Now they look out at the land through my eyes, like lions eager for meat, lurking in the hidden places. Arise, go forth to meet him, prevent him, cast him out, snatch me from the grip of the crooked who is your sword, from these debasers who are your hand, from the world whose portion is in this fleeting life. and whose belly you fill with your hidden treasures, so that they have many children, and they pass on their wealth to them. As for me, I will encounter you in my faithfulness. I will be satisfied, filled with a quiet vision of you.
Thank you. Beautiful reading, Alicia. So happy to have you in the class. Okay, so let's open this up we have a few minutes of responses, compare and contrast, thoughts, whatever's on your mind.
Okay, hold on just 1 second. Let
Yeah,
me take this
let me-
down. Let's see, hold on. Ben Shaffron, I see. Ben?
Good morning. Rabbi, I'm struggling, as a Hebrew speaker, I'm struggling with something that keeps coming in the English translation. The word tzedek is repeatedly by different translators and over again gets translated as justice, whereas my tendency as a Hebrew speaker would be more to use righteousness, which has a different connotation. And I wonder if you can explain.
Tell us more about that. So what would you say, what as a Hebrew speaker, what would you use for justice?
Righteousness. Like, for example, in Deuteronomy, tzedek, tzedek, tirdof
Yeah,
is translated justice, justice, pursue.
right, but
I
would you,
would say righteousness, righteousness, pursue.
okay, but what's the difference for you and what Hebrew word would you use for justice as opposed to righteousness if you see them as different things?
Mishpat would be justice.
Because mishpat is more connected to a court, you mean?
Right. And also in the previous psalm, there was an exhortation against taking the side of the poor just because they are poor.
Yeah.
That's what justice would mean, to be even. Righteousness is more like a tzaddik, more open, more...
So it's beyond, so what you're saying is that for you, justice is beyond the letter of the law and...
No, justice is the letter of the law.
Justice is the letter of law and righteousness is beyond the letter of the law.
Right.
Like taking it, that's really interesting. So, you, in Hebrew, I mean, in biblical Hebrew, mishpat does mean law. What's interesting is that, but it's tzedek definitely has a feeling of just, I have to think about that more, Ben. I've never thought about that. I need to think about it more. I'm making a note to myself. I've got to think about that more. It's a very, very interesting point. And what I don't know is I'd really have to look at some more biblical examples to know is that a modern Hebrew response or is that a biblical Hebrew response? So I don't know the answer to that. I'm writing it down to think about.
Linda Solomon.
Okay. Yes. Hi. The verse 14, where the speaker speaks about people who you give, you feed, and they have children, and they have for their children, and they have more for those who are left over, their children's children. It's interesting that in Levi, there's a negative, I'm seeing that in some of these, there's a negative approach to who the people are being fed by God. And when I first read this, and even in Hebruta, I seem to feel that those were the good people who were being fed, and because they were good, there would be food for their children, and for their children's children. So it's a little confusing for me now that I see other people's translations and they're not what I thought it was. So I'm struggling with that a little bit.
And many people are. It's not a very clear reference. I would say this is not your confusion reflects. There's a lot of confusion about what this really means, and a lot of people have a lot of commentators have a lot of different ideas, but it's not really clear.
Rabbi,
Thank you.
Rabbi, I happened to pull out the Septuagint version. And where you were dealing with, why is it my Rina T and Tefillah, but tzedek. In the Septuagint, it is my righteousness. It is
So
translated.
I mean, this might be a scribal error.
So either
Yeah,
they were looking at a text that had, what is it, Sadki would be my tzedek,
did cut T depending on what.
Sadki,
Mhm.
or the translator or translators of the Septuagint were dealing with exactly the same question of what this was. And my translation of the Septuagint has it as hearken, O Lord of my righteousness.
Isn't that interesting?
With
See,
an option of
yes.
or hearken, O Lord, to my righteous plea. So they're really trying to get it.
Everybody
as a-
notices this because it is weird. I mean, it is, and that's what I mean by the part of studying text is noticing when there's something that's problematic, which doesn't mean it's bad. It just means there's something that's not. And Levy has a whole comment on that. For those of you who have the Levy book itself, Levy says, hear out justice, tzedek is parallel with rinati and tefilati, but the pronominal suffix my is absent. The implication may be that the poet's cry and prayer are pleas for justice. The absence of my suggests that these pleas are not subjective and that the poet's personal cry is for objective justice. So you see, everybody's trying to deal with it because it does stand out and we just don't know. And it could be, as I keep saying, a scribal error that somebody dropped it somewhere along the way. But commentaries now for thousands of years are trying to figure it out. And now it means us too. Does this have meaning for us? Even if it is a scribal error, okay, so what meaning can we find in it as it has been handed down to us?
So Rabbi, I'm conscious of the time.
Yes.
I think we wanted to just do a little housekeeping about the next couple of days. Today is somehow Thursday. I don't know how that happened. So we
I
wish
know.
everyone an early Shabbat Shalom. Anything we need to know about this week's Shabbat, tomorrow's Shabbat service?
No, Joyce, Sam, and I are leading, and I'm giving the
Regular
drash.
Shabbat,
It's
that's
kind of
very
a
good.
regular Shabbat.
Oh, how about that?
Shabbat morning services, regular, and then Purim is next week. So that's our big Purim is next Thursday night. And if you got that, hopefully you got that email last. Oh, and we have a town hall on Monday night for members about the vaccine and vaccinations, and Nate Goldstein and Regina Linder, CBS, our Psalms class member, Regina, who is an expert in microbiology, and Nate Goldstein. Both of them are going to be talking about vaccines. And that email will go out to members tomorrow. And as always,
SAP.
what?
Sorry, no. That was I was queuing up the video and I got an ad. Go
Okay,
ahead.
sorry. So that will go out tomorrow. And as always for town halls, you have to register in advance. And then on Monday, we send out the information to join us for the town hall for members. So those
Right.
are the special things I think happening.
Okay, and so for Purim, will you be prom or PJs? Have you decided yet?
Yes. So yes, every year we let the interns decide what the theme of the costumes are. And so this year they said the theme is prom or pajamas, given that we're all at home, or a mixture of dressing up and your pajamas, or just come in your pajamas, which we're doing all the time anyway, right? Anyway, but
So so today's Thursday. Monday, let's see, Monday and Tuesday we'll be doing translation. No, wait.
yeah,
Monday, we'll be working on translations through Monday. Monday night, Monday at 5 is the deadline for offerings for Psalm 17, which we will be reading. We're scheduled to read on Tuesday and
if we
Wednesday.
get through everything on Monday, we'll
There's
see.
always a little flexibility, but we do
Yeah.
need those Monday by 5.
And again, for folks who have, or for whom, if this is you've never done it, just sit down with the psalm and try and say, what does this pasuk, what does this verse mean to me? If I'm going to come up with meaning from the verse, not what does every word mean, but how do I make this verse say something of meaning to me?
And with that, if we may play out, and Simon, if I could play the video instead of the translation, because it is such a beautiful visual from the inside of King's Chapel in Cambridge, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
And we will be posting this obviously in the Facebook page. So let's skip the Zipcar.
With Zipcar, you can book cars on demand near you. It's
So that is our beautiful
Wow.
for today. I will post this into the Facebook page. Shabbat Shalom, and we'll see you Friday, Saturday, or Monday, or this afternoon at the
Or
forum.
this afternoon.
All right,
Bye,
bye.
everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the meeting. Have a good day, everyone.